To understand this coffin kept like a state secret, we must go back 40 years, far from the capital, where dusty roads crush bare feet and sun-scorched fields sketch the horizon. We are in Guamúchilito, municipality of Navolato, in the state of Sinaloa, northwestern Mexico. There, in July 1956, Amado Carrillo Fuentes is born, in a modest wooden and adobe house, among a large family, in a world where the land barely sustains its people and men seek elsewhere what the soil refuses. Sinaloa, the land of burnt corn and secret ravines, is already, in the 1960s, one of the discrete hubs of Mexican drug trafficking. Police reports mention marijuana, opium, small fields lost in the Sierra, but for the villagers, they are primarily crumpled bills circulating, dusty pickups heading to the mountains, rumors of armed men whom you never look in the eye. The Carrillo family is one of those small farming families who bend under the sun, sell their crops at the nearest market, and endure, season after season, the disappointments of prices too low and droughts too long. But around them, another world is brewing. The hills of Sinaloa already shelter the first illegal plantations intended for the North American market. And in this world of persistent poverty and dangerous opportunities, a name shines like a dark star. Ernesto Don Neto Fonseca Carrillo, Amado's maternal uncle, a rising figure and then founder of the Guadalajara Cartel, the patriarch with extended connections and abundant money. In whispered evening tales, Don Neto embodies the promise of another destiny. No longer the hoe and the dust, but new pickups, leather boots, and wads of cash that snap in the Sierra's wind as a challenge. At the end of the 1960s and the beginning of the 1970s, Mexico is changing, and with it, its trafficking. The United States is consuming more and more marijuana and heroin. In the South, in the Mexican mountains, illegal crops are expanding. At the center of this new clandestine economy, an organization is taking shape, the Guadalajara Cartel. Its leaders, Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, the elegant godfather, Ernesto Fonseca, the cunning patriarch, and Rafael Caro Quintero, the impetuous young prodigy, structure a new system, the plazas. These zones of trafficking carefully divided, each controlled in exchange for tributes and alliances with corrupt authorities. It is no longer a scattered dust of small traffickers. It is a criminal architecture rising, stone by stone, bill by bill. Meanwhile, further south in Colombia, cocaine is on the rise. The Medellin and Cali cartels are seeking safe routes to the United States. The sea is monitored, as is the air. Intermediaries are needed, border passers, masters of secret corridors. The Mexicans become these intermediaries. At first, they are paid in cash. Soon, they demand their share in merchandise. Cocaine, white powder worth more than gold, thus begins to cross Mexican territory, and with it, a new balance of power emerges, richer, more violent, more expansive. It is in this context that young Amado leaves the lands of Navolato. He first moves to Culiacán, the capital of Sinaloa, a scorching city where luxury trucks cross paths with battered old sedans, where administrative offices neighbor smoky cantinas. Then, in the 1970s, his path leads him to Guadalajara, the great city of western Mexico, cradle of the cartel that then dominates the northern traffic. There, thanks to the blood tie with Don Neto, he enters the house of clandestine power. He is seldom seen, seldom mentioned. He is not yet the lord of the skies, but a man of the shadows, a discreet operator. His first tasks are logistical, almost mundane in appearance, organizing routes, ensuring merchandise moves from one truck to another, from an isolated hacienda to an improvised runway, from a hideout in the country's center to a crossing point to the border. He observes, learns, retains. Already, the airplane obsesses him. The road is slow, vulnerable, full of police and checks. The sky offers silent corridors where only radars and clouds can surprise the metal wings. But this seemingly solid edifice, this Guadalajara cartel reigning over marijuana, heroin, and soon Colombian cocaine, carries within it its own flaw. In February 1985, a quake hits its core. DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena is kidnapped in Guadalajara, tortured, murdered. His body is found in a makeshift grave. The brutal crime leaves an indelible mark. The United States, outraged, demand heads. The shockwave crosses borders, disrupts balances, and tears away the masks of complicity that had been tolerated until now. In just a few years, the pillars of the Guadalajara cartel fall one after another. Ernesto Fonseca is arrested in April 1985, Rafael Caro Quintero that same year, Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo in 1989. The great house collapses, but its stones disperse to form other fortresses. The plazas are redistributed like fiefs after the fall of an empire. Tijuana goes to the Arellano Felix brothers. Sinaloa becomes the rising ground for Ismael El Mayo Zambada, Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán, Héctor El Güero Palma. Juárez, the iron gate to the United States, comes under the authority of Rafael Aguilar Guajardo, a former federal policeman turned border lord. What was a single cartel becomes a mosaic of rival kingdoms. Amado, meanwhile, follows the deep current, not the visible wave. At the end of the 1980s, he settles in Ciudad Juárez, in the state of Chihuahua, opposite El Paso, Texas. There, in this border town of concrete, dust, and neon, roads, rails, and runways intersect like the lines of a destiny map. Juárez is a colossal bridge. Highways to the north, railroads, an international airport, a thin river, and fences that separate two worlds and yet unite them. Controlling Juárez means controlling one of the major arteries through which drugs infiltrate the American market. Under the wing of Rafael Aguilar Guajardo, Amado first becomes a valuable collaborator. Aguilar, the former policeman, knows the procedures, the men in uniform, the doors to open. Amado, Don Neto's nephew, knows the routes, the suppliers, the partners from the south. Together they weave a network where cocaine from Colombia or other South American countries finds a safe passage to Texas warehouses and beyond. But already, in the shadows of warehouses and plush salons, Amado's trademark is emerging: the conquest of the skies. Starting in the late 1980s, DEA reports begin to note a recurring pattern. Planes, sometimes small aircraft, sometimes jets or even cargo planes, depart from discrete runways in Colombia or elsewhere, crossing Central America and landing on clandestine runways in northern Mexico. These runways are hastily drawn in isolated ranches, in desert expanses, in plains where only the wind witnesses the nocturnal ballet of planes. The cargoes are unloaded at full speed, transferred to land vehicles, then transported to warehouses around Juárez, before crossing the border in the constant flow of legal goods. Gradually, a nickname is born in the reports, then in the press: El Señor de los Cielos, the Lord of the Skies. Not out of poetry, but because no other trafficker dares, at this scale, to thus challenge the airspace, amass a fleet of metal and kerosene to transport the white powder. In the roar of turbines, in the scraping of tires on dirt runways, in the clinking of crates unloaded under the moon, the legend of a man is forged who no longer wants to be content with following roads, but with inventing new ones, above the radars, above the laws. At the border, authorities begin to seize more cocaine. The itineraries overlap, the names recur. In the DEA offices, in internal reports, that of Amado Carrillo Fuentes appears more and more often as that of a key operator linked to the Juárez networks. Diplomatic cables, judicial files bear the same conclusion. A new power is emerging, less noisy than some, but more structured, more ambitious. Cooperation between Mexican and American authorities strengthens. Joint intelligence groups are set up, obsessed with Juárez roots, and this man who seems to speak the language of Colombians as well as that of Mexican generals. At the turn of the 1990s, the narcotics trafficking map has changed. The major Colombian cartels, under pressure, seek docile allies. The Mexican organizations, they no longer want to be mere smugglers. Amado finds himself at the center of this mutation. He becomes the intermediary between the producing South and the consuming North, the pivot between Amazonian tracks and American highway interchanges. Around him, other Mexican cartels, Tijuana, Sinaloa, watch, envy, contest, ready to battle for roots, to open fire for a corridor, a city, a bridge. In the humid heat of Cancun, in April 1993, the sea rolls out its indifferent waves, while at the edge of marble-smooth hotel pools, glasses clink and laughter rises. Behind the glass and concrete facades, another scene is prepared. Rafael Aguilar Guajardo, former federal policeman turned lord of the Juárez roads, walks flanked by guards, sure of his rank, sure of his empire. The man with two faces. He ignores that his steps already resonate like a death knell. Silhouettes are waiting for him, weapons ready, faces closed, linked to another name rising in the shadows. Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the future Lord of the Skies. The bullets crack, break the air, break the flesh, break a rain. The sand drinks the blood. Mexican newspapers report the assassination. The Procuraduría General de la República records the details. Mexican and American authorities designate, though not always naming, the new master emerging behind the smoke. In one night, the Juárez cartel changes hands. In one night, an empire shifts to another lord. After 1993, the reorganization is cold, methodical, relentless. Amado, discreet silhouette, measured gestures, settles at the top of the criminal pyramid. Below him, he places lieutenants for each art: logistics, security, finances. One manages the convoys of trucks and planes. Another watches over the killers. Yet another makes the numbers dance in the accounts of shell companies. DEA files and judicial archives trace this invisible architecture. The Juárez cartel becomes a machine greased by fear and gold. Now, every corridor, every clandestine track, every warehouse obeys a precise scheme. Thus rises, in the dust of northern Mexico, an army without a flag, carried by rumor and secrecy. The Chihuahua Desert, with its burnt horizons, sees this silent power grow. From mineral Durango to the plains of Coahuila, sometimes to the edges of Tamaulipas, the roads bend to a new law. Convoys slither at night, headlights off, loaded with carefully sealed bales. Villages hear the rumble of engines, smell gasoline and dust, sometimes see pickups with tinted windows pass by. The Juárez cartel tightens its grip on these strategic northern corridors, according to PGR and DEA reports. It controls the bridges, the bottlenecks, the crossing points like a general controls mountain passes. But strength is not only based on weapons. In the overheated offices of the federal police, in the dark corridors of the judicial police, in town halls with flickering neon lights, envelopes change hands, promises are whispered, gazes turn away. Corruption, the black metal that buys silence. Officials fall later, pursued for collusion, revealing a patient, ramified, tenacious network. Money flows into real estate, hospitality, fictitious companies. Sparkling hotels, glass towers, lands bought outright. Behind each freshly painted facade, the trace of a bill stained with pork. Further south, beyond the jungle, the great Colombian cartels waver. Medellin, Cali, their names resonate like distant storms, struck by repression, internal divisions, betrayals. A new era opens. The Colombians can no longer control the path to the great northern market alone. So comes a pact, a silent mutation of the economic model. Reports from the DEA and the U.S. Congress describe it. Henceforth, Mexican organizations are no longer mere for-hire transporters. They are paid in kind. A share of the cocaine, taken at the source, becomes the tribute that founds a new fortune. Mexicans not only take risks, they take a share of the White Kingdom. Amado, privileged partner of networks from Medellin and Cali, becomes the indispensable intermediary. He coordinates the shipment to the United States, transforms each track, each warehouse, each plane into an artery of a gigantic body. The amount of cocaine transiting through Mexico explodes in the 1990s. Among the operators, one name recurs: obstinate. The Juárez Cartel, pivot of the new criminal order. Then, the sky itself becomes a royal road. Amado's air fleet, described by the DEA and the American press, is not a tavern legend. Dozens of planes, small, nimble devices, jets polished like blades, sometimes even Boeings. Anonymous hangars house these steel birds. The pilots, faces tanned by the sun, take off from Colombia, Venezuela, other South American lands. Their crafts slice through the clouds, fly low, skim radars, land on clandestine tracks lost amidst bushes or stony plains. There, in the night, men unload tightly bound packages, transfer them to trucks, to trains, to the northern border where fences glisten under the spotlights. Sometimes, a plane is abandoned in a field, belly open, cargo seized, fuselage consigned by the PGR and the DEA. These silent carcasses witness one thing. Never had the winds of Mexico carried such a fleet. In this landscape, Amado is not alone. Other Mexican powers advance their pieces. The Sinaloa cartel, with Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the fugitive with 1,000 tunnels, and Ismael El Mayo Zambada, the discreet veteran, sometimes share routes, warehouses, contacts. American indictments mention these occasional cooperations. Here, a shared runway. There, a combined cargo. Elsewhere, a corridor jointly guarded. But the alliance is always precarious. To the west, the Arellano Felix family reigns over Tijuana, the border city of neon lights and cries. There, the rivalry is fierce. Clashes erupt, fueled by the rage to control every door to the north. The judicial files, morgue records, local archives from the mid-1990s keep track of these underground wars. In the streets of northern Mexico, bullets dot the map as much as road signs. The roots of blood cross the roots of drugs. On May 24, 1993, in Guadalajara, the drama crosses a threshold. At the airport, under the bright daylight, passengers come and go, suitcases in hand, smell of kerosene in the air. Among them, a man in a purple cassock, dignified silhouette. Cardinal Juan Jesus Posadas Ocampo, voice of the church. He moves towards his car. Armed men approach. Seconds contract. Gunshots crack, sharp and dreadful, reverberated by concrete and glass. The cardinal falls, hit by bullets, his liturgical garments stained with bright red, incongruous. The Mexican and international press seize the case. The scandal is immense. How can a prince of the church die thus, in the middle of an airport? The government claims it is a tragic confusion. The prelate was mistaken for a cartel leader, perhaps Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, in the tumult of a clash between Tijuana and Sinaloa. But some within the church, some in civil society, dispute this version, doubt, whisper other hypotheses. One thing is certain: the Mexican state finds itself under burning pressure. Washington intensifies its demands, requires results, reinforces cooperation. In the DEA reports, certain names come to the forefront. Among them, shining and menacing, is that of Amado Carrillo Fuentes. As his empire grows, eyes turn toward him. By the mid-1990s, the DEA lists him among its most wanted traffickers. Official communiques proclaim it. Amado becomes a priority target. U.S. federal courts issue indictments for drug trafficking and conspiracy. Reward programs are set up, promising riches for information, betrayal, location. In the quiet offices of American services, wall maps display the routes, faces, nicknames. In the center, in clear letters, a name to be brought down. But the most terrible threat doesn't only come from abroad. It arises from the very heart of the Mexican apparatus. In 1997, a political earthquake shakes the country. General Jesus Gutierrez Rebollo, director of the National Institute for the Fight Against Drugs, proclaimed hero of the anti-drug crusade, is arrested. The government's accusations are striking. The man in charge of fighting the cartels allegedly maintained ties with Amado, warned him of certain operations, protected him. PGR communiques, press articles, indignant speeches. The affair reveals the depth of the poison. The government's credibility wavers. The public discovers the corruption power of the Juárez cartel, capable of reaching the highest ranks. The state looks at itself in the mirror and no longer recognizes its face. From 1996, the hunt intensifies. The PGR and the Army multiply operations against hangars, ranches, warehouses linked to the Juárez cartel. Tons of drugs are seized. Lieutenants fall, handcuffed, head bowed before cameras. Villas are confiscated, accounts frozen, runways closed. Official communiques follow one after another, like blows lent to a beast still standing. In the Mexican press, rumors already swelled. Amado would be constantly on the move, changing states, changing countries, slipping into the shadows of unknown cities. He is said to be in Mexico City, then in Ciudad Juárez, then abroad. Never confirmed, always elusive. Police and journalistic sources mention his desire to disappear halfway, to make himself smaller, more discreet, to change his appearance. He knows now his face is a trap. His own reflection can betray him. Thus, an irrational, desperate decision is imposed as a fate. In 1997, the PGR and the press later reveal that Amado had planned a major cosmetic surgery. Change his face. Perhaps more. Reshape his body. Lose traits. Erase signs. Outsmart the identification records and the photos circulating under the lamps of the police stations. Contacts are made with surgeons in Mexico City. Agreements are sealed in quiet offices. The smell of medical alcohol and disinfectant. Low voices. Files slowly closed. The context is suffocating. Threat of extradition to the United States. downfall of allies within the institutions, protection cracking like an old plaster. The man who dominated the skies now seeks to hide behind a new mask of flesh. On July 3, 1997, in the capital with pale lights, a man enters a private clinic under a false identity. The hospital, often identified as Santa Monica, looks like others. White walls, echoing corridors, the smell of latex and sterile products. Yet, that day, destiny takes its place on the operating table. Amado is admitted as any patient, but behind the anonymous forms, the doctors know. At least 2 surgeons, later named by the authorities, Dr. Ricardo Reyes Rivera, Dr. Carlos Humberto Avila, are about to touch the most wanted face in the country. The planned plastic surgery and liposuction are not a mere whim. They are an attempt of erasure, an act of survival. The operating lamps light up, dazzling, unforgiving. The instruments shine like pure blades. Anesthesia flows into the veins, silent, cold. The operation begins. The exact details blur between forensic reports and whispers, but the official version, that of the PGR, talks about complications, a body that cannot withstand the duration, the dose, the violence of the act. In the heart of Mexico City, the Lord of the Skies stops breathing. Not under the fire of his enemies, not in a plane crash, but on an operating table, defeated by the hand that intended to transform him. The hours that follow are confusing, dense, almost unreal. In the clinic, some staff members, some presumed accomplices, initially try to conceal the identity of the deceased. They adjust registers, modify names, close doors. The dead no longer has a face, they think. But the state, this time, is watching. Thanks to intelligence, thanks to fingerprints, according to the PGR, the authorities pierce the veil. The anonymous body regains its name, Amado Carrillo Fuentes. On July 4, 1997, the Mexican government officially announces his death. The national and international media relay the news, repeat it, engrave it in the air. On the streets, in the garrisons, in the DEA offices, a chapter closes in a sentence. The man who dominated the cocaine routes, who bought generals, who made the sky bend under the weight of his planes, now lies on an immobile stretcher. Thus ends, in the icy whiteness of an operating room, the apotheosis and fall of the Lord of the Skies. In the heavy heat of the Mexican capital, in the heart of the summer of 1997, a light stone building with echoing corridors becomes the stage of a silent scene. In the premises of the Procuraduría General de la República, the PGR, men bent over files, photos, records. Before them, a name, Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the master of the skies. On the metallic tables of the forensic doctors, an inert body, pale under the harsh light of the neon lights. The fingers are taken one by one, pressed on ink, then on paper. Fingerprints, those tiny drawings, trace a voiceless verdict. The registers open. The old files come out of the archives. The features match. The lines fit together. Then, the PGR speaks. It confirms, in the July 1997 communiques, the body found in the Mexico City clinic is indeed that of Amado Carrillo Fuentes. The forensic doctors, they open the flesh. They inspect the organs, measure, describe. They note an embolism, complications related to anesthesia. They record death as a surgical accident, not as a shot, not as an arrest, but as a failure in the middle of an aesthetic gamble. On the skin, they observe the recent marks of the scalpel, the still fresh lines of plastic surgery, clear signs of an attempt at metamorphosis. Under the icy light of the autopsy room, the Lord of the Skies is no more than a breathless patient, and the empire of the sky is summed up, for the moment, in a forensic report. But outside, in the shadow of the streets, another story is already beginning to whisper. In the days that follow, as documents pile up and official seals are closed, two names disappear from the world of the living. Dr. Ricardo Reyes Rivera, Dr. Carlos Humberto Avila. Two surgeons, two artisans of the aborted metamorphosis. They too are found, but elsewhere, later, broken, lifeless. Their bodies testify without words. Officially, these deaths are homicides, presented as the price of silence, the revenge of a faction, or the careful hand that erases witnesses. No clear trial, no entirely closed judicial chronology. In this uncertain space, between the PGR reports and the newspaper columns, speculations flare up. Who orders these executions? An internal faction of the Juárez cartel? Rivals lurking in the shadows? Accomplices who fear the doctor's words? Each hypothesis fuels the same ember. If the surgeons die, what does this operating table really hide? As the questions rise, Amado's death ceases to be merely a medico-legal fact. It becomes a knot of intrigues and silences cut with a knife. Then comes the time for funerals. In Mexico City, a funeral parlor in the capital welcomes a coffin, watched over by hard stares, by armed men, by authorities controlling the entrances and exits. The neon lights mingle with the drapery veils, with the heavy scent of wreaths. On the silk ribbons, a first name returns, clear, assumed. Amado. Television cameras linger on these flowers, on these guards, on this staging where death becomes a watched spectacle. Then the coffin leaves the city of stone and smog to return to the northwest, to the land of origin. Sinaloa, the land of fertile valleys and rugged mountains, the cradle of modern drug trafficking. There, according to press reports, the body, or at least the coffin, finds its place under the ground, under the heat, surrounded by an imposing security apparatus. For soon, the rumor advances faster than the certificates. In newspapers, in street conversations, even within police circles, a stubborn hypothesis forms. What if he wasn't dead? What if the Lord of the Skies had taken to the skies one last time, leaving behind a double, a shell, an illusion? The deaths of the surgeons serve as fuel for this collective imagination. The strict control around the body, the corruption power attributed to the Juárez cartel, all seems, for some, to outline a perfectly orchestrated escape. Yet, no solid evidence feeds this vision from beyond the grave. The Mexican and American governments maintain their version. The agencies tasked with tracking traffickers, led by the DEA, confirm Amado's death based on fingerprints, cross-referenced intelligence, technical analyses. No official procedure, neither in Mexico nor in the United States, contradicts this line. The rumor remains, insistent yet bare, in the face of the thick wall of files stamped "Deceased" on July 3, 1997. Between the sealed paper and popular speech, a gap opens where the legend already rushes in. The states themselves cannot remain immobile in the face of the fall of such a colossus. In Mexico City, the government presents Amado's death as a victory, a major success in the fight against drug trafficking, even if it must acknowledge that no policeman put handcuffs on the Lord of the Skies. The victory does not have the form of a triumphant arrest, but that of a lifeless body on an operating table. In Washington, the DEA and other agencies confirm, align, validate. The dead man is indeed the one they hunted. Yet the files do not close. The indictments remain for the others: associates, lieutenants, pilots, financiers. The disappearance of one man does not erase the lines of ink already drawn in the courts. Thus, while official speeches celebrate a fallen head, the judicial machine continues to grind against the other cogs of the Juárez cartel. In the secrecy of the secured houses on the northern border, another battle begins, more silent, more dangerous, that of succession. Amado leaves behind an empire, a fleet, routes, armed men. Who will speak in the name of this legacy? Gradually, a name emerges. Vicente Carrillo Fuentes, his brother, soon known by the nickname El Viceroy. Brother in blood, de facto designated successor, he takes the reins of an organization that cannot afford disorder. Around him, the Carrillo Fuentes family mobilizes. Brothers, nephews, relatives weave a continuity of flesh and blood around the criminal enterprise. The DEA reports, Mexican investigations, subsequent arrests outline this family framework that attempts to maintain the cohesion of the cartel. But times have changed. If the basic structure of the Juárez cartel survives, it begins, at the turn of the 2000s, to lose its luster. Other names rise, more daring, more fragmented, more ferocious. Under Vicente's leadership, the cartel resists, but already its influence is cracking in the face of the rising waves of Sinaloa, the Gulf, and Tijuana. The throne that Amado held no longer has the same height. For the death of the Lord of the Skies does not leave a winter of silence, but a spring of covetousness. In the shadows of the Sierras and along sun-scorched roads, other organizations advance. The Sinaloa cartel, rooted in the valleys of its youth, takes advantage of the partial void left by Juárez. Its men, its routes, its alliances develop, patiently documented by the DEA and the seizure statistics. In this shifting landscape, new creatures appear. Paramilitary groups, armed squads, elite forces raised not by states but by cartels. Among them, one formation stands out: Los Zetas, born as the armed wing of the Gulf Cartel, originally composed of former soldiers, men trained for war. As criminal power fragments, these groups bring a colder, more professional, more spectacular violence. Mexico enters, in the 2000s, an era of fire. Clashes between cartels for control of routes and plazas, besieged cities, villages taken hostage. The official statistics, NGO reports, and survivors' accounts converge. The death of a lord did not quell the storm. It unleashed it, dispersing its power among more numerous and less restrained hands. Faced with this growing chaos, the Mexican state seeks political weapons. Amado's death becomes an argument, a proof exhibited in speeches. Cooperation with the United States bears fruit. Information exchange works. The big bosses fall. Gradually, a strategy takes root and hardens. That of the decapitation of cartels, the systematic takedown or capture of leaders, of capos, of symbols. This approach, initiated in the 1990s, is reinforced under subsequent presidents, inscribed in official records, repeated like a mantra. Without a head, the monster dies. Yet, beyond the numbers, beyond the security reports, one thing remains: the name. El Señor de los Cielos. The nickname survives the flesh. Newspapers, books, documentaries continue to pronounce it as a title, almost like a function. In the historical analyses of Mexican drug trafficking, Amado is described as one of the great architects of aerial logistics of cocaine, a craftsman of the bridge between the Andes and the North American border. DEA reports, academic research, and testimonies from former officials repeat the same idea. He was not just a trafficker, he was an organizer of the sky. His methods become a model. The massive use of aviation. The dispersion of investments in hotels, companies, glass and concrete buildings, high-level corruption as a structuring principle. All of this inspires subsequent generations. Other capos imitate, adapt, perfect. This is the invisible legacy of Amado. Networks, habits, reflexes that survive long after his last breath. This heritage also extends into the imagination. From the late 1990s onwards, authors publish investigative books, non-fictional biographies, digging through judicial archives, interviewing witnesses, piecing together the fragments of a clandestine life. Then come the moving images, television series, telenovelas, productions inspired by his trajectory. Among them, one bears his very nickname, El Señor de los Cielos. These works, often fictionalized, amplify, dramatize, invent dialogues and scenes. They turn him into a character, a mythical figure of fiction. Social science researchers analyze this phenomenon. Amado's image, enlarged on screens, ceases to belong only to archives. It enters popular culture, conversations, in the distorted dreams of crowds. So, vigilance is required. In serious works, historians, criminologists, scrupulous journalists draw a boundary. On one side, the established facts, dates, operations, alliances, death. On the other, embellishments, exaggerations, inventions. Between the judicial file and the television soap opera, a line of fire runs, which must constantly be reminded. At the end of this trajectory, a grave and naked assessment imposes itself. Based on the available documents, the official version remains. Amado Carrillo Fuentes dies on July 3, 1997, in Mexico City, following surgical complications. Neither the Mexican government nor the American government have since revised this conclusion. But shadows persist. Journalistic investigations, academic works recognize areas of uncertainty. Who exactly orders the death of the surgeons? What internal complicities make possible the operation, the escape, the organization of this fatal transformation? Some doors remain ajar, allowing a breath of doubt to pass through. On the other hand, one point is no longer debated among those who study these obscure worlds: the enduring impact of the Lord of the Skies. Security agencies, researchers, former agents agree that he plays a central role in the logistical professionalization of Mexican drug trafficking and in the configuration of the cartels in the ensuing decades. He is a pivot, a turning point, a threshold. Thus closes, without concluding, the story of a man born in the lands of Sinaloa, who rose to the top of the Juárez cartel, transforming cocaine routes, corrupting up to the highest spheres, and dying, not in a shootout, but on a cosmetic surgery table, in the heart of Mexico City. His trajectory tells more than a life. It reveals the transformation of Mexican drug trafficking, shifting from an economy based on marijuana and heroin to a transnational logistical system dedicated to cocaine, articulated around clandestine airstrips, secret airports, deep complicities.